I got the nickname MSG on the East Coast from all my East Coast Grateful Dead loving fans. Exactly my initials, but I'll take it. So I have a story that's kind of a mixed bag today. Setback for psychedelic therapy. FDA advisors vote against medical use of ecstasy. Independent expert panel, and that's important to note, an independent expert panel. It's not the actual FDA. It's poured cold water on hopes that MDMA, better known as the party drug ecstasy, could be part of a new treatment for PTSD. First psychedelic drug with regulatory approval in the United States. Advisory committee convened by the U.S. FDA concluded yesterday that clinical trial data provided by Lykos Therapeutics not enough to show that MDMA-assisted psychotherapy was effective and safe. The decision marks a reversal of fortune for MDMA. FDA granted the drug an expedited review process in 2017 based on encouraging early reports about its ability, in combination with talk therapy, to alleviate PTSD that affects millions, including some military veterans. That possibility has been a centerpiece of the recent renaissance of medical research on psychedelic drugs. Ongoing clinical trials are testing several psychedelics to treat all kinds of conditions. A press release issued after the meeting, Lykos Therapeutics emphasized that FDA is not bound by the committee's decision. While we are disappointed in the vote, we are committed to continue to collaborate with the FDA with their ongoing review of our NDA, which is a new drug application. The all-day meeting, committee members had to grapple not just with the data from 2 phase 3 clinical trials, but also with allegations that participants were pressured to not report negative outcomes, and horrifically enough, with a case of sexual misconduct by one therapist in one of the earlier stage trials. Committee's decision is truly bizarre, says David Nutt, a pharmacologist at Imperial College London and longtime psychedelics researcher. It calls into question a regulatory system that allows new versions of potentially lethal opioids for pain. It denies the most novel and safe intervention for treatment-resistant PTSD ever seen. If FDA follows the panel, it would be very deleterious for the field, he said. According to the Department of Veteran Affairs, about 13 million adults in the U.S. suffer from PTSD in any given year. Haunted by the memory of a traumatic event, their bodies are responding as if there's the same level of threat as when the event was actually occurring. These 2 Lykos trials conducted in the U.S., Israel, and Canada included close to 200 people with PTSD who received a course of psychotherapy that included 3 8-hour sessions with either MDMA or a placebo. A combination of the drug and the talk therapy is meant to help patients relive and process their traumatic memory. Member after member of the advisory committee raised concerns about how to interpret this data. One challenge that has long plagued psychedelic research is how to keep study participants blinded, being unaware of which study arm they're in, actual drug or placebo. You can tell when you're high. Data from the second trial revealed that more than 90% of those in the MDMA arm and 75% of those in the placebo arm correctly guessed their group. In a briefing document released before the meeting, FDA warned that this functional unblinding could allow patients' and therapists' expectations to bias the results. But counters that concerns about unblinding are overblown and would apply equally to other drugs such as antipsychotics, but often aren't. So why focus it on here? Actors of psychedelics are hiding their prejudice, moral objections, dislike of illegal drugs behind a sort of pseudoscientific smokescreen. Follow-up study that included 137 patients from the phase 3 trials showed a durable effect of MDMA from 6 months to more than 2 years later. That finding, too, is difficult to interpret because with those with more positive experiences might have been more likely to take part in the follow-up study. Further complicating the debate was the fact that members were asked to decide on the efficacy not of MDMA alone, but the combination of MDMA and psychotherapy. FDA does not regulate the practice of psychotherapy, and so this is kind of like a weird way of trying to fit this thing through this trial system. Especially looming over the meeting was a report by the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review. They were an independent nonprofit that analyzed the evidence for clinical and cost effectiveness of treatments. They alleged, based on interviews with those with first or secondhand knowledge of the trials and related events, therapists encouraged favorable reports by patients, discouraged negative reports, including reports of substantial harm. The meeting, Lykos' senior medical director, Alia Lillenstein, denied specific allegations that some participants were discouraged from participating in the long-term follow-up study, didn't respond to the suggestion that therapists discouraged patients' negative reports. Lykos did acknowledge that one participant in a phase 2 trial was sexually abused by her therapist. Mandating specific training and qualifications for therapists might help protect vulnerable patients from harm during these sessions. For most members of the panel, the combination of misconduct allegations and the uncertainties about how to interpret the data to create an unsurmountable hurdle for these tests. It's actually strange to vote no when trial data suggested such a clear effect from the drug, one of the committee members, Atish Iyengar, a statistician at the University of Pittsburgh, said while explaining his vote. But there were just too many problems. So this is really sad news, and the number one thing it looks like is that apps and their sister company, for-profit company, Lycos, really fumbled this in just about every way, shape, or form. From additional reading I've done, they really created kind of a cultish group around this, and they really are guilty of trying to push the results instead of just present or more straight ahead results in this. And so it's not the end for MDMA, for PTSD or other therapies. It's not the end of psychedelic research. I think that this report from the advisory panel really points to the fact that if we're going to get these drugs okayed, we need to have more stringent, not even equally stringent trial measures. Everybody needs to be focused on their best behavior, on really getting the clearest, most transparent studies so we can push these forward. And as for the allegation of sexual misconduct, all I can say is that's horrific, and I'm just disgusted and blown away by it. That being said, there is an underground group of psychotherapists that's been expanding throughout the country, but a huge group centered here in the Bay Area that have been using MDMA for PTSD, talk therapy, and couples therapy since the 60s and 70s. And it's really well known that the substance has great efficacy and effect in helping humans to heal, either by itself or with talk therapy. And so I, for one, just hope to see better studies, better trials done, and people taking Rick Doblin to task, because really clear-headed maps and Lycos blowing a for sure touchdown effort here. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to share.
Yeah, this is such an interesting study. It's got a real twisted argument that they've used against THC as well. You can feel the high, so you can't tell the difference between the placebo and the treatment. And because you can feel the high, then it's not a good study. I think it's a twisted logic, but that's really why THC pills are 10 milligrams or less, because that's right at the border of feeling the high.
Really? That's why they did that number.
Yeah, I talked with Ethan Russo about this. This is why
I've always wondered that. I have always wondered that. So then, basically,
that is definitely one problem. I mean, for me, the biggest, putting the sexual assault, because I think that has nothing to do with the trial itself and more to do with that particular therapist. The fact that they were coaching people to either take part or not take part in the study, and the therapists were really, several of the therapists have been found, not by any committee or certifying body, but by just a preponderance of the evidence, have been found to be coaching people to reach their outcomes in one way or the other. It's just screwed up and invalidated something that could have led to help for millions of Americans to stay off of these other antipsychotics and SSRIs, to really heal their emotional body and their minds, and have all that payable by insurance, and you just fumbled it at the 1 yard line because you're trying to aim the study. Yeah, I don't think that was necessary.
I totally agree with you, Matthew, and I hope the medical board or whatever oversight that oversights whoever these people that are doing these studies definitely reams this guy, removes his license or whatnot, because and it's just especially disheartening that they were doing a study on MDMA, which we all know what MDMA does, and the fact that there was a sexual assault while someone was on MDMA, to me just bothers me even more.
Well, and also it's hard enough to get a drug approved, and then on top of that, a very controversial drug that's already has stigma and seen as a party drug, or has all these extra hurdles on top of it.
Let's just call it euphoric effects, Elise.
Right. And, euphoric effects and immense benefits. I mean, there's no room for error. You can't be messing things up. And they're going to look for every reason to not approve you. And there was just such a long list of things that they messed up here. And of course, the sexual misconduct being the most offensive and alarming, but really there's so many boxes that they just failed to check or really fumbled, and it's a bummer. And but the sexual misconduct thing is also unfortunately something that didn't just happen in this study, but has been going on in the movement, and is something that all need to be aware of, and why a lot of women need to take precaution before just going to any ceremony or supposed practitioner.
100%. And I think those benefits that you were referring to, Elise, would be commonly referred to as friends with benefits.
Oh, God. I'm interested to see the fallout, and I'm interested to see both the large corporate and wealthy donor side to MAPS, as well as the shareholders and donors to Lycos, taking Doblin to task, and kind of what the fallout is going to be after this. This is definitely a developing story, and is going to produce some news and some waves for some months going forward.
And you'll keep us updated on this, on the continuance of this, correct, Matthew?
No, you know it.
All
Don't
right.
be dissuaded, you guys. Take ecstasy. Listen to the Grateful Dead. Some LSD. Go to the park. Love yourself,
Sasha
love your neighbor.
Get some 2CB.
Why not hit a bong and take an acid fart?
I do have to digress too and say I really liked hearing Dr. Mark say acid farts over and over in his scholarly professorial voice. Mr. Acid Farts.
We're gonna have to make a soundbite out of that and just put it, loop it.
Acid Farts.
So, Jean, just to touch on this again, this is kind of like traversing that topic of accepted medical use, right? So when the FDA says no, there's no medical use, because MDMA is Schedule 1, isn't that correct? I think it's right. Yeah, it's still Schedule 1.
Yep.
But it's interesting that the class of drugs it belongs to, which are the amphetamines, are all like on lower schedules, right? And so, so there is accepted medical use for amphetamine and amphetamine derivatives, but this is kind of like the bastard child because of Sasha Shulgin's, whole blow up of this thing and the ecstasy scene that it created. I think this molecule in particular belongs to a family of amphetamines that are all lower on the schedule. So,
Well, actually, I mean, pharmaceutical amphetamines are Schedule 1 now. Things like Adderall and Vyvanse, those are all Schedule 1.
oh no, you can't.
No, they can't be because they're prescribable.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah,
they're
those are
not
prescribed, and so they have that. That's just the point I'm making.
They're harder to get prescription.
They may be written in triplicate form as far as the prescription, but they are not Schedule 1 drugs.
But they have an accepted medical use, right? Because a doctor like John could write a prescription for Adderall for some kid with ADD or ADHD, right? So that would be a lower schedule, right? But John, I don't know. What do you think about kids with ADD and ADHD, giving them Ritalin and Adderall? Doesn't that just basically get these kids lined up to be meth heads later on in life?
That would be an interesting study. But remember, the scheduling is not done by scientists. It's done by police officers, Department of Justice. And they can do crazy things with their scheduling. And they have with cannabis, clearly, where they synthetic cannabis and synthetic THC is Schedule 5, right?
Right.
Wow.
I was going to say... I was going to say this before when we were talking about this accepted medical use versus non-accepted, or all cannabis use is medical. Is the FDA and the DEA, I believe, view recreational use as an abuse of a medically accepted drug. There is no recreational using of drugs, right? And so they view as the recreational use as being you're abusing something that has accepted medical use. And again, that's where this flies in the face of reality, because whether people are using it recreationally or they're using it just to knock off a little bit of stress at the end of the day, they're using it because they feel good and they are being medically treated by that cannabis. But when we use the term recreational use, it kind of, is two steps backwards, because of this reason. They view as recreational use is nothing but abuse.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Sorry to end on such a down note.
Yeah, I was, man, especially with the MDMA story.